an OG from Medarot's early beginning in the original Medarot of 1997. It is NTB00 Teepee, with the kit of triple melt, biped legs, and the leg ability of straight, which passively buffs the success of equipped melee parts. Now, as a model that's not only an event reward that has come and gone, Teepee is one of those models that may be relatively slept on, and not a lot of people may recognize him at first glance. Unless, of course, you've played Medarot 2 Core, which, of course, is the Game Boy game that was localized, or even watched the anime in the couple episodes he actually appeared in as part of Team USA in the World Robattle Championships. Melt on all three parts is an ailment-based skill that, upon attacking a target, will inflict them with a damage over time effect that will slowly whittle their HP down. So, much akin to how he was in the early days, it's good to see that Teepee most certainly has not strayed from his humble beginnings, as a model designed not necessarily as a nuker by himself, but as a model that's designed to essentially whittle you down over time for someone else to come up behind him and finish the job much easier than he can. And honestly, that's still saying something, because even despite being a DOT specialist, his base power across the board is actually pretty impressive, if I'm being honest. His head's packing about base damage of 1410, right arm and left arm between the low to mid 1300s, almost 1400s. Means that even though he most certainly is lacking the pierce damage potential that most other conventional models may have, he most certainly makes the most of every punch or headbutt that he puts to use. Biped legs also means that he has relatively solid coverage across all terrains, as biped is arguably one of the best well-rounded legs in terms of terrain compatibility. And across the board too, Teepee's overall specs aren't too shabby, kind of to be expected of a conventional balanced model like himself and what you'd expect of him. With a head HP of about 3324, which is a very unique number to being completely honest. Arms about 2800 each, and his legs at about 3550 means he has a moderately decent HP pool. Arms are just a little squishy, but some caution exercise may help keep him alive longer and as long as he needs to be to help make sure that he stays on the field. His leg stats aren't too shabby, but also kind of to be expected of a conventional, decent base model like him. A base mobility of 744 is kind of in that mid-range where bipeds typically want to sit at, so not generally terrible, but also not overly superior either. An evade of 756 is not super great, as it does mean that Teepee will not be focusing too heavily on dodging or grazing compared to most other models that may consider it or specialize in it. A melee resist of 1386, though, is very good, as it most certainly means that Teepee can hold his own up close and personal incredibly well while keeping his damage as low as possible. But a shoot resist of 697 unfortunately is not great. Even if he's just barely cusping 700 there, he will be taking a pretty considerably noticeable amount of more damage from shooting attacks for any that do manage to pass through. Plus, the fact that his biped legs cannot support any heavy parts, albeit that's not really a problem for him as a pure set, also acts as another deterrent to anyone possibly considering using him, even as mixed parts across the board. Now, even though he does specialize in a relatively high base power for melt and DOT types like him, it is also worth mentioning that because he has it on all three parts, that does kind of tie in the redundancy argument and make using him very tricky on the field. Plus, if the enemy has stat cleanse on the enemy's side, that honestly makes it even more difficult for him, as pretty much 80% of the reason he's there is effectively useless. All this being that said, though, as a pure set score, I still do have to rate Teepee a pretty solid 5 out of 10. Kind of a middle-of-the-road kind of bot, not necessarily one of those ones you absolutely must raise, no questions asked, but he's also one of those models you certainly don't want to sleep on either, especially if you do have any ties or love for the anime where he most notably made an appearance as part of Team USA. Plus, even having the ailment on all three parts isn't bad per se, and the straight leg ability means he will have a much higher likelihood of being able to land the hit without being dodged or grazed. As mixed parts, though, I do have to rate him equally at a 5 out of 10, given that his stats are kind of mixed range within that decent category, so again, he's not anything superb or powerful to write home about, but if you did manage to get a hold of this event reward, he is honestly a model that probably wouldn't hurt to have raised just for the sake of having him on hand. And Melt is, even if it is one of the least used ailments, in the right hands can actually be pretty nasty, as especially for maybe super heavy tank types or defenders, this can be a very good way to whittle them down over time while you're busy working on them or someone else, so that your really powerful nuke skill or your metaphor sweep can absolutely take them out with as minimal effort as possible.